Pennsylvania, a state often celebrated for the iconic Battle of Gettysburg, holds within its borders a vast and largely overlooked landscape of historic battlefields that rarely find their way into mainstream discussions of American history. While Gettysburg rightly commands national reverence as a symbol of Union victory and the turning point of the Civil War, many other battlefields scattered across Pennsylvania remain hidden in plain sight. Places where blood was spilled, strategies were devised, and the future of the continent was shaped in silence and obscurity. These sites are more than mere remnants of past conflicts. They are repositories of stories that illuminate the broader tapestry of American history. They tell of early resistance against colonial powers, indigenous struggles for sovereignty, colonial ambitions, revolutionary fervor, and the tumultuous years of nation building. Yet, despite their profound significance, they are often ignored or forgotten by the general public, their stories buried beneath the more prominent chapters of history we tend to revere. One of the earliest and most critical theaters of conflict in Pennsylvania was the French and Indian War, a conflict that predates the American Revolution, but was equally vital in shaping the continent's destiny. This war was not merely a prelude to independence, but a full-scale clash between European empires, the French, British, and Spanish, for control of North America. Among the key early engagements was the Battle of Fort Necessity in 1754, fought near present-day Farmington. Though often overlooked, this battle marked the opening engagement of the war and was significant for its symbolic and strategic implications. It was here that a young George Washington, then a Virginia militia officer, faced his first military defeat. The crude stockade he hastily constructed under pressure became a symbol of early American inexperience and ambition, and its surrender set in motion a series of events that would escalate into a global conflict touching every continent. The story of Fort Necessity reminds us that the roots of American history are deeply intertwined with the colonial struggles and international power, plays that predate the founding of the United States. Further north, the strategic importance of Fort Duquesne, now the site of downtown Pittsburgh, cannot be overstated. This formidable French stronghold at the confluence of the Allegheny and Monongahela rivers was a focal point for multiple military campaigns aimed at securing control over the Ohio Valley. The failed Braddock expedition of 1755, led by British General Edward Braddock, was a pivotal moment in colonial military history. It demonstrated the limitations of traditional European battle tactics when faced with the wooded terrain and guerrilla tactics employed by indigenous allies and French forces. General Braddock lost his life in the disastrous assault, and George Washington, then a young officer, survived and learned crucial lessons about leadership, terrain, and diplomacy with native tribes. These early experiences would profoundly influence Washington's later leadership during the Revolution. The story of Fort Duquesne and the Braddock expedition underscores the complexity of colonial warfare, where alliances, terrain, and tactics often determined the outcome more than sheer numbers or firepower. Transitioning into the period of Revolution, Pennsylvania again played a vital role, this time as a battleground for the fight for independence. Beyond the well-known winter at Valley Forge, which served as a symbol of resilience and perseverance, there were numerous lesser-known but strategically vital engagements that helped shape the revolutionary struggle. The Battle of Brandywine in 1777, near present-day Chadds Ford, was a significant encounter where General Washington attempted to prevent British forces from capturing Philadelphia, the revolutionary capital. Although the Americans lost the battle, the engagement tested the resolve of the Continental Army and exposed the growing pains of an emerging military force still learning to fight and coordinate effectively. Just weeks later, the Battle of Germantown within Philadelphia's city limits took place. Though it was another defeat, this daring assault demonstrated the increasing capability and daring of the Continental forces. These battles, often overshadowed by Gettysburg or Saratoga, contributed to the eventual alliance with France and the eventual victory, illustrating that even setbacks on the battlefield played a role in forging American independence. Even during the War of 1812, Pennsylvania's strategic significance persisted. though the primary theaters of conflict were along the Canadian border and along the Atlantic coast. The state's shipyards along the Delaware River contributed significantly to the construction of naval vessels, while towns across Pennsylvania prepared militias and fortifications in anticipation of a British invasion that fortunately never materialized on a large scale. The conflict left behind a legacy of training grounds, fortified positions, and logistical hubs that remain today, often buried beneath modern development or forgotten in overgrown parks. These sites serve as silent witnesses to a war that reaffirmed American sovereignty and tested its resilience in the face of foreign invasion. Perhaps even more underappreciated are the Civil War battlefields outside of Gettysburg, which played a crucial role in the broader scope of the conflict. Skirmishes, raids, and troop movements crisscrossed southern Pennsylvania in 1863, illustrating how the war's reach extended far beyond the famous battlefield. The town of Chambersburg, for instance, was burned to the ground by Confederate forces under General Jubal early in 1864, in retaliation for Union destruction in the Shenandoah Valley. This act of terror was one of the few instances of intentional civilian targeting during the war and had a profound psychological impact on northern civilians. It underscored the brutal nature of the conflict and foreshadowed the total war strategies that would evolve later in the Civil War. The scars left behind on the land and in the collective memory of local communities serve as poignant reminders of the human cost of conflict beyond the grand battle. In the western part of Pennsylvania, the state was home to Union training camps and logistical hubs that were critical to the Northern War effort. Camp Curtin in Harrisburg, for example, was the largest Union Army training camp during the Civil War, with over 300,000 soldiers passing through its gates. While no great battles were fought there, its importance in training, organizing, and supplying Union troops was vital to many of the battlefield victories elsewhere. Similarly, lesser-known rail lines and armories scattered across the state enabled rapid troop and equipment movement, often making the difference between victory and defeat in crucial moments. These sites, often overlooked, remind us that victory on the battlefield depends not only on combat but also on logistics, infrastructure, and preparedness. Even as the 20th century arrived, Pennsylvania continued its strategic importance, this time in the context of global conflicts like World War I and World War II. The state's industrial might made it an essential component of the American wartime economy. Philadelphia's shipyards produced vessels that helped secure Allied supply lines, while the coal mines of Scranton and steel mills of Pittsburgh supplied the raw materials necessary for war production. Though these sites were not battlegrounds in the traditional sense, they represented front lines of a different kind, where economic and industrial power shaped the outcome of global conflicts. Workers in these industries often labored under dangerous conditions, risking their lives in fires, explosions, and accidents, yet their sacrifices contributed directly to the war effort. Their efforts are a quieter but equally vital chapter of Pennsylvania's military history, emphasizing that the home front is an often overlooked but essential aspect of victory. Today, many of these historical sites are preserved only by small local organizations, historical societies, or private citizens. Unlike Gettysburg, which attracts millions of visitors each year, places like Fort Ligonier, Paoli Battlefield, or the remnants of Camp Curtin remain under the radar. You won't find massive monuments or tourist buses at these sites, but you will find echoes of the past carefully maintained in the soil, stones, and markers that still stand. For example, Paoli Battlefield, site of a brutal nighttime bayonet assault by British forces in 1777, earned its nickname, the Paoli Massacre, and became a rallying point for American resistance. Yet it remains a footnote in most textbooks. Similarly, Fort Ligonier, once a major British fortification during the French and Indian War, has been reconstructed and offers a tangible glimpse into the colonial struggle for control of the Ohio Valley. These sites may lack the grandeur of more famous battlefields, but their stories are no less significant. Exploring these unsung battlefields isn't just about military tactics and dates. It's about understanding how ordinary people experienced extraordinary times. It's about seeing how geography, politics, and personal courage intersected to shape the identity of a nation. Pennsylvania's fields, forests, and towns hold stories that are raw, complex, and deeply human. They challenge the notion that history is only written in grand victories or famous speeches. In truth, history's true fabric is woven everywhere. In quiet moments, in overlooked places, and in the collective memory of communities that fought and endured. These sites remind us that every place has a story and every story has value. So if you ever find yourself driving through rural Pennsylvania or hiking through wooded trails near an old stone marker, I encourage you to take a moment to wonder what happened there. Pause, look around, and imagine the lives that intersected in that place. Soldiers, civilians, native peoples, and workers, each contributing to the unfolding story of a nation. You might be walking across land where battles were fought, lives were changed, and history turned quietly beneath the trees. These unsung battlefields deserve our attention, not just for what they tell us about the past, but for how they remind us that history is alive all around us, often in the most unexpected places.